From the darkest reaches of space to the deepest corners of your mind. Welcome to From the Void.
Welcome back to From the Void. On this week's episode, I bring you part 2 of my interview with author and UFO researcher Preston Dennett. If you missed part 1, pause, go back, and listen to that one first, then come back to this episode. If you've already listened, then welcome to this week's mystery with my guest Preston Dennett, part 2 of UFO Disclosure on From the Void. That's fascinating. First of all, I often wonder, though, if they just at some point get frustrated with us as a planet, because despite the fact that a large number of us absolutely would agree that we are absolutely killing the planet and want no part of a nuclear society, it still feels like the ones that are in power ultimately make the decisions on which course we go, and so it often to me feels like, gosh, if I was a much more highly evolved civilization that was visiting, I'd be like, these cave people, and I would just be so frustrated.
Yeah, well, we've got evidence of that. I interviewed a lady by the name of Dolly Safran, and I ended up writing a full-length book on just her case called Symmetry, A True UFO Adventure. She's a fully conscious contactee who doesn't need hypnosis, has an enormous amount of evidence supporting her case, and is absolutely for real, and has had long conversations with the ETs about precisely that. They are frustrated, and they are doing what they can. They have contacted governments who don't listen, who are making the wrong decisions, and that's precisely why they're doing a grassroots movement and going to the people, because it's the people who are the most, who have the power on this planet. It feels like we're being run by these 1%. That's only because we're allowing it. If everyone said, you know what, I'm not picking up another gun and fighting for you. And you know what, we're not going to allow you to fund both sides of a war. We're not going to allow you to pollute our rivers and our lakes and our oceans. If everyone just stood up and allowed love and truth to guide their actions and really worked on developing their psychic ability so that we could know if a person is lying, instead of being like, gosh, I don't know, and meandering around in the dark and just trying to survive, we would have a chance. So this is exactly what the ETs are trying to do. And you'll see this. It's almost every contactee will tell you that they have a wide variety of paranormal experiences. I don't like that term paranormal. It's not accurate. There's no such thing as the paranormal or supernatural. It does not defy the laws of the universe. It's just that we don't understand what's going on here, at least the mechanics perhaps behind it. I think we're beginning to. So, the ETs are doing their part. It's up to us to do ours. Stop listening to these lying government folks. I don't even like calling them government, because I think there are a lot of good people in government. But these naughty folks who are on my naughty list know who they are.
Yeah. It does feel a bit like the old saying, I'm paraphrasing here, but if someone were to see technology that was 100, 200 years advanced into the future, it would seem to us like magic. And so, so that's where I think I personally get frustrated with, like, I'd like to keep a very skeptical mind about things, because to your point earlier, I think with the advancement in technology, at least, accessible to the public, the waters are so muddied at this point with just, as you said, just garbage out there that's just fake and just makes it that much more difficult to suss out the real deal. And partly that's what causes such a slow release of information, because real investigators like yourself have to vet out everything that they come across to make darn sure that this thing is the real deal before you go public, because your name's behind it.
Yeah.
But that's where I get frustrated with, like, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Finding out UFOs were real. Because I came into this field as a skeptic. I did not believe a word of it until I found out, my brother had seen a UFO. My sister-in-law saw ETs. Members of my family, my coworkers, good friends were having dramatic encounters. And ironically, finding that out and realizing UFOs were real made me super skeptical, made me question everything. To this day, I really am like, I don't know if I trust anybody, because I was lied to for so darn long. This subject is not being taught in schools. I was so shocked to find out that there was a cover-up. And it's not speculation at all. It's easily demonstrable. And people don't realize just how much of their own money is being spent to suppress all of this. And boy, if we could get that technology out there, we wouldn't be worrying about, how much gas costs and how to warm our homes and where we're going to get the next food on our table. And this subject is far more important. There are people who say, I've never seen a UFO. It doesn't affect me. I'm like, yeah, it does. Your whole life is being affected by this UFO cover-up.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's where I think I also sort of get frustrated with some of mainstream science and the lack of an open mind when it comes to the subject. I mean, just mathematically speaking, it's impossible. Even if it's a 1 in a million chance that life exists elsewhere in the universe, then it exists a lot. Even if it's 1 in a million, there are trillions upon trillions of stars out there. I mean, we're discovering planets outside of our solar system every day. I mean, they just started talking about a planet they had discovered that's about 8 times, I think they said, the size of Earth, that quite possibly has the materials to support life. I mean, that's just one. And so it's almost ridiculous to me that we're still even having a conversation to think that we are so special, that we're unique, that we're it in the entire universe. That's ridiculous to me.
Well, we're victims of this cover-up. Honest to God, we really are. And I don't want to have a victim mentality. But it's the truth. And this is why we're fighting an uphill battle to get people to accept the idea that there are ETs. Mm-hmm. And I see this movement in the UFO community that I find concerning, to say the least, which is that prominent investigators are saying, well, maybe these aren't ETs at all. Maybe it's an interdimensional intelligence that's putting on different masks to manipulate our belief system. And I'm like, wait, hold on. What's your evidence for that? Where is this coming from? Why would you say this? And I'm like, well, the UFO phenomenon is so strange. Okay. It seems to defy the laws of physics. Well, as you know it, as we understand it, because you mentioned earlier, technology so advanced could seem like magic. And there's a segment of the population that truly believes this is demonic. And I've debated them. And I had to dive into demonology, which I didn't want to do, but I did. And I've investigated hauntings that were horrific hauntings, where people were possessed by dark spirits. It's a real thing. I've looked into angels. I've looked into multiple personalities. I've looked into all of this stuff. Paranoid schizophrenia. Every aspect of the paranormal that might be at all related to this Bigfoot. And I don't understand why major investigators will say this is not ET. I argued with one who was quite a prominent investigator. And he basically said, there's too many different types of ETs out there. There's little short guys and little tall guys and dark skin and light skin. There's too many different types. Do you honestly believe that those are all ETs? I'm like, yes, I do. Look at people on Earth. I want to line up 1,000 people from Earth, from every different culture, all the way from 3 feet tall to 8 feet tall, with every skin complexion, every eye shape, every nose shape, ears, all of it, so I can show the variety that we have on one planet. And honest to God, when people start telling me that, well, this is a phenomena that is manifesting physically based on our belief system, and it's all about us, it's an anthropocentric theory that never pans out throughout history. But what about the crash retrievals? What about Roswell? What about the Paradise Valley crash in Arizona, Aztec, New Mexico? I mean, there's a bunch of them. Spitsberg Island, and there's a good 100 easily that are pretty well verified. And bodies, of course. So let's get that out there. Explain that to me. How is that a symbolic phenomenon that's coming down to manipulate a belief system if we've got technology, craft, with beings and bodies? All bets are off at this point. We know what this is. It's extraterrestrial. I will allow that some stuff is being put under the UFO umbrella that perhaps doesn't belong there. Because I've interviewed people who've seen like little elf-like beings who are probably not ETs. Perhaps, what we would call crypto-terrestrial, perhaps, or a supernatural being. Because I do think that exists. There are ghosts. There is Bigfoot. I got dragged into Bigfoot kicking and screaming just like UFOs because I didn't want to go there. I thought, this is going to open up a can of worms. What if Bigfoot is real? I really don't want to look into it. But I had to, of course, because I started getting cases, especially when they were connected, which, like, oh gosh, this is going to be a can of worms for sure. And it was. But I think we just need to take a good hard look, stop trying so hard to pigeonhole everything and label everything, and just recognize that this is a real phenomenon. And it is extraterrestrial. At least a good portion of it is extraterrestrial. I think the evidence is conclusive, overwhelming, compelling, outstanding, whatever you want to call it, mountainous. Look at the evidence and stop relying on prior beliefs for what this might be.
So let's talk about that though. Because I'm very much on board with when we're talking about this subject and looking for evidence, the easiest thing to point at is the physical nuts and bolts type evidence. And so, we have apparently, according to to David Grush, who recently, and first I also want to mention, because I think this is a huge deal that people didn't really see as being as significant as it was. Because I know a lot of people within the UFO community were kind of disappointed when it was Grush and Ryan Graves and David Fravor, 3 people that we had already heard do interviews before. But what was important about this is not only testifying before Congress, but they did so under oath. And I feel like that is a huge deal, and people, I don't think, saw the significance of that. So talk about that real quick before we get into, because I also want to talk about sort of some of these crash retrievals as well. Yeah,
I mean, this is a big deal. And certainly Grush has talked about how he's suffered reprisals. And I know of other cases, and this is well known in the UFO community, where whistleblowers have come forth and absolutely regretted it because they lost their lives or were threatened or family members threatened, or worse. I mean, it goes right down the line. There was a guy, Dr. David Jacobs, not the researcher, a guy who worked at Vandenberg Air Force Base, who filmed a UFO circling a missile. He went forward and suffered incredible reprisals, threats, phone threats. They blew up his mailbox. They told him, don't talk. He did. And if you go online, you can find his interviews. He's angry. And I've talked personally to not a whole lot of whistleblowers, but a handful, because it's rare that a whistleblower comes along to my path for whatever reason. But I did talk to a guy on his deathbed in a hospital who wanted to do his part to reveal his involvement in witnessing reverse engineering of UFO craft at Edwards Air Force Base. And I talked to a guy who was directly involved in the Malmstrom incident in Montana of March of 1967, where UFOs came down and basically shut off the missiles. So my point is, yeah, those three witnesses were under oath, but they are 3 of 3,000 people in the sidelines who are scared, who are afraid to come forth, who signed non-disclosure agreements, who know stuff that would blow all of our minds because, the cover-up is real. We do have these craft. A lot of people are involved, and they're going to their death not telling anybody. I just talked to a guy, Earl Grey. He's a MUFON guy, a contactee. His mother was deeply involved in all this and told him a little bit about it when he was 5 years old, not thinking he would remember, but he did. And she was heavily involved. She's like, it's all real. These ETs are here. We have the craft, the bodies. And one day he told her as an adult, and she turned pale and says, honey, you can't talk about that. He accidentally brought it up at school as a kind of show and tell thing. And they ended up removing all the UFO books from the school. Oh, boy. It was a big deal. This is serious stuff. There are an enormous number of people out there sitting on information that would change the world and certainly change the way we view the UFO phenomena, and especially change the way we view the folks behind the cover-up.
Yeah, and I think the other piece that I thought was really important was the three individuals, Grush and Fravor and Graves, are highly impeccable professionals who are all highly intelligent individuals who have, outstanding, impressive resumes behind them. So in terms of the first sort of pioneers, in a way, to come forward and go under oath, you couldn't pick three better individuals, as it seems. Even though obviously there's been some backlash afterwards, especially when it comes to Grush, one of which, calling his mental stability into question, which I thought was rather disgusting of anyone to put that out there.
For sure.
Yeah. But anyone you talk to, it seems like anyone they've interviewed who have worked with them in any capacity have nothing but positive things to say about their character and that sort of thing. So I thought that was a huge a piece of it. And the fact that, again, under oath means that if they are proven to be lying about any of it, they go to jail.
Yeah. There's a big deal. There's on the fence about all of this being tightly controlled propaganda. Like, okay, we're going to allow you to step forth. This is what we want you to say. I don't have any evidence of that, but this is what they've been doing for so long that I'm wondering about some of these witnesses. Are they being encouraged to step forth and in an effort to control the narrative? Because really, we should be having people coming out there who have evidence and can spill it out right away. And he said, well, no, I don't really have any, I've talked to people who've seen them. He's kind of beating around the bush a little bit. He says he's seen some stuff, and he did submit it. So we'll see. But I am getting impatient. I got involved in this field, and people are like, disclosure is going to happen. You got involved in this field in a good time. It's right around the corner. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And, of course, it didn't happen. And it's just a brick wall. I mean, I'm amazed to hear Congress talking about it. But I want those members of Congress who saw UFOs to come up and say, I saw one. I saw this. I know it's real. Say it. We need to really have truth and transparency full on. I mean, it's time to stop, beating around the bush with all of this and handling it with, delicate fingers. I mean, we need to just cut through all the bull, if I may use that term.
Absolutely.
And just get to the heart of the matter and say enough is enough. Tell us the truth. We know you have the craft. Roswell happened. Roswell is a bit of a dead horse. People saying, let's move beyond Roswell. No, let's not. Let's get that craft and let's see it. There's a report of a UFO landing at Edwards Air Force Base from Gordon Cooper, an unimpeachable witness who saw the footage, developed it, and handed it off, and we've never seen it again. I want to see that footage. I want to see the footage of the Eisenhower meeting in 1954 at Edwards Air Force Base, which most researchers who've looked into think is a legit event. So that's what I want to see. I know this evidence is out there. Let's see the gun camera footage. Lou Elizondo said what the footage that's been made public is nothing compared to what he's personally seen. Let's see that.
Yeah, and again, to kind of go back to what you said earlier too, there are a lot of firsthand witnesses who, to your point, have come out later, sort of on their deathbeds, or at least well into older age when, there's less to lose, I guess, at that point. A lot of the witnesses around the Roswell event, including the military official who initially, his name is escaping me right now, you probably know, but the guy who originally gave the press conference and
Walter Haut,
came out later in life and said, they gave me this scripted nonsense to read, but that's not what I saw. He even came out later and said that was all nonsense.
Yeah, and he saw the bodies. He did not say that for a long time due to fear of reprisals. I love the Roswell case because we tracked it from beginning to end, from people who were in the radar room, people who saw this thing coming down, people who found the craft on their property or bits of it, people who guarded it, who stood around it, people who came up to the scene, Dan Dwyer, the fireman, Frankie Rowe, who was threatened and told that she could be dog food in the desert if she says a word about this. And all the way to the people who scooped up the wreckage, people who flew the wreckage, Pappy Henderson, the people who studied it at Wright-Patterson and various other places. We've tracked this case from beginning to end. And for the Air Force to come out and say, we solved it. It's a mogul balloon. Case closed. Shut up. We know that's wrong. They were attacked immediately on all sides because they're, those bodies. What about those? Oh, those are dummies. But wait, those weren't used until 1952, or was it 54? Some 5 years after the Roswell case. Can't be dummies. You're lying. And that's not what people described. So it's ridiculous that they're still not telling the truth about Roswell. And how old is that case now? 70, 80 years old. It's absurd. And we know it goes back to even earlier, the early 40s, because there was the Battle of L.A., the L.A. air raid. There was a case in, where was it? The Northeast, Minnesota, I think it was. Yeah, Cape Girardeau, Minnesota, 1942 or 40. Some really good witnesses to that case of a UFO crash. So that's 60, 70, 80, almost 85 years now that this has been covered up. It's time to stop it. Stop it. Tell the truth. It's so much easier to tell the truth anyway. And I think maybe if we could just find a way to forgive and not, say, punish people or pursue them in terms of lawsuits, and just say, okay, tell the truth and all is forgiven. Perhaps that would open up some doors. But it's not going that way. People are suing now, suing for the truth. So, all right, let's do it that way. Fine. If you're not going to tell the truth willingly, we'll make you tell the truth unwillingly.
It is very interesting because, kind of following the aftermath of the testimony before Congress, or before the committee anyway. What's interesting is sort of obviously the next logical step is, hey, these people who were first-hand witnesses that Grush claims to have spoken with, who have seen and touched and witnessed these craft and these beings, it seems that they would be the next logical ones to come forward and testify to the fact that this is what I saw. Like, we want people, as you said, who literally were firsthand witnesses who can say, yes, this is exactly what I saw, and this is exactly what we worked on, and that sort of thing. But now it seems like we're running into all sorts of obstacles. Grush said, I'd be more than willing to testify to Congress or to this committee in a skiff, but now it sounds like they're being blocked from being able to do that. And so, it's just so frustrating.
Why not bring on the contactees? NASA is completely ignoring the fact that people are being taken on board. No word about Betty and Barney Hill and Travis Walton and the Pascagoula case, Charlie Hickson and Calvin Parker. Let's talk about them. Let's let some of them testify. Sergeant Charles Moody had an onboard experience. He's a great witness. He's probably passed away at this point, but there are so many people who've had direct contact. And you're telling me you don't know what this is. Let's march these witnesses into Congress. I've got a few people who I think have enough evidence to convince anyone that this is a real phenomenon and that it is ET. And this is not a person who saw a photograph and, this sort of thing. These are people who interacted directly. This is the heart of the UFO phenomenon, contact. And they're not talking about that. They're talking about sightings mostly. Right. In terms of, Daley and Moultrie in front of Congress. Said, we've collected some 400 sightings, and one is a balloon, and we think it's a technology. It could be extraterrestrial. It hurt them to say it. They used that word once.
Yeah.
But why not talk to the people who know? I'm going to bring up the landing trace cases because I love them. They are indisputable hard evidence. Let's talk about the angel hair. People don't even know what angel hair is when I bring it up. And this is a substance that's absolutely physical evidence associated with a UFO encounter. And it's apparently the plasma fields surrounding a craft will interact with the atmosphere in a way that brings down this cotton candy spiderweb-like substance, sometimes in large numbers. There's easily 100 cases in the literature that are super easy to find. But it's been scooped up. It's been put in scientific labs in multiple countries. France had a really remarkable case. Italy, Australia, all across the U.S. have put this in laboratories and studied it. This is outstanding physical evidence that can't be easily explained. Let's start talking about that instead of these simple sightings, which have very little information to offer, compared to someone who's spent 2 hours, 3 hours on board a craft, or even far longer in a bunch of cases.
Yeah, it is interesting to see how other countries have sort of handled the phenomenon. France, for one, that you mentioned, France seem to have been a little more open about their government studies on the subject. But is there a sense that there are any countries that might sort of lead the way if it's not us?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think we're a little bit behind the curve for sure. This subject is super popular in the U.S., and it's widely covered in the press because of that. And, I've talked to people all over the world, actually. England, I was on a radio show in France. I'm like, well, you guys are definitely ahead of us. And they got mad at me, like, no, we're not. What's that group, SOBEPS? Cometa.
Yes.
It does have previous government folks in it. And I brought that up. I'm like, no, that's not sitting government. They are covering it up worse than you guys are in the U.S. And we argued about that. And certainly, England has released a bunch of files. We have too. Canada has come forward to a significant extent. Paul Hellyer, the former defense minister of Canada, made some very unequivocal statements about this subject. But ultimately, I think the countries that are ahead of all of us are Mexico, for one reason, because they have said it's a real phenomenon. They think it's extraterrestrial, period. There was an event in 1991 in Mexico City during the solar eclipse where a UFO showed up over Mexico City and was videotaped 30 different times, 30, throughout the city. So you could triangulate it. So now we know exactly how high this object was and how big it was. And it wasn't a balloon. This footage is super hard to find, but you can find it. And it's some of the best footage out there. And Mexico has made very positive statements. And I'm really pleased to see that they're holding this government hearing talking about this and putting forth more evidence than we are. I mean, I don't know about these little ET mummy bodies. We'll see. But it's amazing to see that this is being discussed. And Chile as well, and Brazil, both have gone a little bit farther than we have in terms of forming an official government body that is a little bit more truthful and transparent, and is saying, yes, this is a real phenomenon. There's still a lot of waffling, like, we don't know what this is, which I think is 100% disingenuous. Because all you have to do is pick up 10 UFO books, and you'll know more about UFOs than any one of these yahoos in Congress or NASA or Pentagon who's barfing out a string of lies as if they don't know anything. I'm like, really? Here, I've got a book for you. Read this one. Read Timothy Good's book, Top Secret. Read J. Allen Hynek's books. Read the Coral Lorenzen and Jim Lorenzen's books. Read one of mine. I've got like 30 of them. Read a book on this subject before you come and start talking publicly and saying there's nothing to this. I mean, it drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely frustrating. One of the things I want to kind of go back to, because I think it's a really interesting topic that you briefly mentioned earlier, was the Eisenhower alleged meeting between Eisenhower and some government officials, and allegedly some of the alien beings who came down and sort of had a closed door discussion, as it were. And what's interesting to me about this too is that more recently, Eisenhower's, I believe it was his granddaughter, has publicly said she absolutely believes that this took place. Yeah,
Laura Eisenhower. Interesting, isn't it? I looked into that, the 1954, February, I believe it was, meeting at Edwards Air Force Base in Southern California, where Eisenhower and leaders of business and religion and politics and science and even the UFO community, they brought in Gerald Light or Meade Lane, one of those guys. A lot of people were apparently there who were high-level folks. And I looked into it because I was writing a book, UFOs over California, and I ran across that because this was basically a history book of UFOs over California. This wasn't being done. Now, a lot of people are covering various states, so I'm super excited about that because this subject wasn't being recorded for posterity. And so I'm looking into the Edwards Air Force Base complex and certainly ran across that story. But Edwards took up a whole chapter in the book, Edwards alone, because it had cases all the way back to 1945 of these objects coming over the base. J. Allen Hynek was there, and that's when he realized there's something to this. It changed the way the military handled the UFO phenomenon, the events at Edwards in 1945. And since then, they would have regular waves. In 1965, they had a major flyover caught on radar. You can look this up. The radar footage reports is indisputable. They know this is real. They know what it is. So my point is, Edwards Air Force Base is a UFO magnet from the beginning. I mean, there are reports of landings. Like I mentioned earlier, Gordon Cooper was there when a UFO landed on the runway, and they filmed it. There's case after case of insiders who say we are reverse engineering craft at Edwards. And I have one myself. So this is a series of events that is far more complex than people realize. It absolutely blows Roswell out of the water. It's much more extensive than that. And the 1954 meeting is kind of the central core of it, the crux. Because when that happened, Eisenhower disappeared out of sight of public view, March of 1954, and the press went crazy. They're like, where's the president? Did he, one press said, he's dead of a heart attack, because they could not find him. And he later said, oh no, it was a dental emergency. Well, researchers have tracked down the dentist, and they're like, no. And they have a person who specializes in the archives on calls coming in about this, trying to debunk it and just handle all the publicity that's surrounding this event, because a lot of researchers have looked into it. And the more time that goes by, the more evidence that's coming out. Immediately after the event, there were reports, whistleblowers, saying that this meeting happened. And in essence, what happened was, as far as I can tell, because I'm not this isn't my specialty, I'm more into the contactee thing, but I looked into this, I'm following the reporting on it. UFOs did land. It was a planned meeting. They were government officials were warned about this. We're going to come down. We're going to have a diplomatic meeting. And I think this was one of the last, because in essence, what happened was these were essentially human-looking ETs, and Eisenhower, according to some sources, was actually taken on board and given a ride and taken back down, and they demonstrated how they can turn their ships invisible and turn at right angles, and they wanted us to disclose. And we said, no, we're not going to do that. Can you give us your technology? And they said, no, we're not giving you technology. You need to teach people about spirituality. You're lagging behind in terms of morals and ethics. You're abusing your technology. No, we're not giving you technology. You need to stop your nuclear program immediately, because it's causing all kinds of problems. You're going to destroy yourself. And they're like, no, we're not doing that. So there was an impasse. And there's I honestly think, disinformation going on about some Grenada Treaty or some treaty where we allowed abductions to take place in exchange for technology. Don't think that I followed the reporting on that. I think it's disinformation. I don't believe it for a second. ETs would not hand over technology to an abusive government. And besides, they don't need an agreement. They can do what they want. They've been scooping up people before that, and they're doing it after that. So I don't think that's credible. But this incident absolutely did happen. And there was a number of researchers right off the bat who jumped on this. Brinsley-Laporte Trench, I think, was one of the first, a French researcher who reported on it. But since then, the evidence that took place is outstanding. And I think it's absolutely a true event. And someday we'll learn more about it, I hope. I'm not holding my breath. But I don't think that so-called treaty ever happened. I don't find that believable. I talked to Dolly Safran about that, actually, because she's talked with the ETs, and they told her, Roswell did happen. Yes, that meeting did happen. But no, we have never made any treaty with any government. We do not interact with them at all anymore because they are making poor decisions. They cannot be trusted.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense, because, if they had handed us technology, you'd think they would have given the instructions with them instead of having us for decades trying to reverse engineer these craft after they've either crashed or allegedly, apparently, according to Grush, like in some instances, just straight out stole them. You'd think that if we had some sort of agreement, then we'd be a lot further along in that project than still decades later, sort of still trying to figure out how they work.
Yep, I 100% agree. It's fun, there's some good. The funny thing about crash retrievals is it's all anecdotal. It's really unfortunate, because here's the best evidence we could ever have, absolutely conclusive, and it's relying solely on eyewitness testimony. But, the Roswell, of course, has several hundred witnesses and 100 books. 100 books on Roswell. I've got about 10 of them. I'm like, that's it. I can't buy any more Roswell books. But it's interesting to me because, there's so many of these cases. And there's reporting on a UFO that was recovered that we can't even get inside. We can't open it. And some of them we open up and we look inside and there's nothing in there. There's no noticeable furniture or panels or controls or, even what we would think of as a power source. But I think the reason is because we don't understand this technology. That is in fact, because I've talked to the contactees, and they have asked about this. These ships are flown psychically. The ships themselves are entities, or embodied, rather. They're partly biological. And every single person who's been pulled on board a UFO and taught how to fly these darn things, and there's a lot of them. This was all, what Dolly Saffron talked a lot about. They taught her how to fly the craft. And I believed her because I had several witnesses who were describing the same thing well before I came across her case. But then Grant Cameron, Canadian researcher, just put out a book called Sky Pilots. And he outlined some 60 cases of people who are saying the same thing. And he said in every single case he researched, the people who are piloting these craft or being told how they work, it is done psychically. So this is how far behind we are in understanding ET technology. It is absolutely consciousness-based. So it's going to be a long road in terms of reverse engineering. We're not going to get there. But I don't want to say that completely, because a lot of the stuff we're seeing now is absolutely, there is anti-grav craft. The TR-3B is often cited as being reverse engineered ET technology. And the guy I talked to, who was at Edwards Air Force Base, saw a UFO in a hangar floating there. And I'm shortening the story, but he found out, he was told after a big back and forth, that this wasn't a UFO. This was reverse engineered from ET technology. And it was flown using magnetic fields. So, yeah, our understanding of ET tech, we have some of it. We are flying these around. I was told way back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, that at least 20-25% of what people are seeing is our own. So we have to be really careful now when we're seeing stuff in the sky that seems to defy what we think of as conventional aircraft, because a lot of it is being piloted by humans who are the folks behind the cover-up, who don't have our best interests in mind, and are actually nefarious. They're the ones I'm scared of. There is an ET threat, and it's to them. Their power structure, their control over the populace, they're holding on to the technology. That's the threat. It's the people on Earth I'm worried about, not the ETs.
Yeah, and for folks listening who don't know what the
TR-3B?
TR-3B, yeah, that's a top secret project, and those are like the black triangular shaped craft, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I was looking through my files because Dolly, I keep bringing her up because she really connected a lot of the dots for me. She's like, no, the ETs don't really fly triangular craft. And I started arguing with her. I'm like, no, I think you're wrong about that. She's like, no. I'm pretty sure I'm right. I've worked with them. So I looked through all my files, and I was shocked. I don't have triangular craft. People are describing boomerang craft, saucers, egg-shaped objects, spheres in some cases. Saucer is absolutely the most common, cigar-shaped, but from a certain angle. And let's face it, this is a technology that they can change their shape and size if they want. And they do. So it's a little confusing. And this is why I think some researchers are like, well, maybe this is an ET. Because, look, it's changing its shape and it's doing all these weird stuff that we don't fully understand. I'm like, well, yeah, you don't understand it. Talk to the contactees and you'll get a clue as to what's going on. And I just want to underline that because everything we know that's at all legitimate about extraterrestrials comes from one source, the contactees. It's not our governments. We cannot trust them. Yes, they're feeding us information, but it's not trustworthy. And it's not the pundits on TV who haven't even read a UFO book and are calling themselves scientists, but are refusing to examine the evidence. And I'm pointing to, I'll name a couple, Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'd like to talk to him.
Oh, me and you both.
And say, listen, I'd really like to dig into this with you. Michio Kaku, who said, why doesn't someone just take off a clock from a UFO? Or Carl Sagan said, like an ashtray. I'm like, hold on a second. Have you talked to people who've been on board? In fact, the very first well-known contactee, Antonio Villas-Boas, was taken on board. He's the first publicized case of a person being taken on board. He tried to steal something from the UFO, and they weren't having it. And that ended his contact right then and there. And I looked into it. There are cases of people who've been given objects, and often they are immediately, I was going to say attacked, in a sense attacked, but approached hostilely by the government agents who take all the stuff that they were given. So there are people who have had artifacts from UFOs. I mean, there was a case in Ecuador, I think it was, reported by Jimmy Jeu, a French researcher, where two boys were using their flashlight in Morse code and had a UFO land, and they went on board and had a friendly interaction, gave the ETs their flashlight, and the ETs gave them a flashlight of some kind, which probably had more uses than ours. But they unboarded the UFO and were running home when helicopters and jeeps came up, scooped them up, and apparently paid them off because you cannot find them anymore. I didn't investigate that case, but I know of cases like this. I mean, there was a guy, Constance Clear invested this case. She's a researcher, a guy from Texas, who said that he was given a gift by the ETs. The ET said, "Thank you for working with us. We're going to give you this little gift. It's a sort of galena. It's iron ore, is what it looked like." And they said it'll appear in your, in a place, in a location where you'll recognize it. And it was on his dresser, following a contact. And he didn't tell anybody. He called up his researcher and said, "I'm coming over. I'd like to see you." And was driving there when he was run off the road by not the Men in Black ET types, but government agents who ran him off the road, took all his contact papers, threatened him not to talk about it, took the artifact, and he's like, "You can't do this. I'll sue you. I have rights." And they said, "Do what you want. We can do what we want. I wouldn't talk about this if I were you." And basically threatened him and took all the material. So my point is, some people have gotten artifacts, but it's not as easy as you might think when you're having ET, an onboard experience, to just grab something. Because every case I've looked into, that's not been successful. And I found about 5 or 10 people who tried to sneak something in their pocket. Didn't work. It just didn't work. So, with all due respect to Carl Sagan, you try getting a piece of a UFO. It's, even photographing a UFO is not easy. It's a rare contactee who gets really good photos of a UFO. And they're having regular contact.
Yeah, that's, the frustrating part about Neil deGrasse Tyson's sort of hesitancy to support the movement is, where are the good non-blurry pictures? And then I think his other... The part that bothered me the most, I think, about his response initially was something to the effect of the distances are too vast for anyone to travel. And I thought that's sort of like akin to saying, back in the 1800s, well, we've got this steam engine. This is about as good as it's ever going to get, and not thinking that, well, perhaps in another 100, 200 years, we'll have something vastly superior to this. I mean, we weren't thinking of stealth bombers back in 18 whatever, and so it seems to me that, like, if we are acknowledging the fact that there could be civilizations out in the vast universe, and it is extraordinarily vast. In fact, I would use Neil deGrasse Tyson's own work to support that. If you've ever seen the very first episode of his version of Cosmos, where they sort of do the visual demonstration of just how massive the universe is. Again, it goes back to, the math just says we cannot be alone. But to think that, there may be much older civilizations out in that vast universe, who's to say that they haven't cracked the mystery of long distance travel, and again, you mentioned earlier anti-gravity technology. The science supports the idea that you could, in effect, fold space-time in half and leapfrog these massive distances. So I just don't understand his hesitancy to even be slightly open-minded to the idea that we may not be alone, and we may be visited now and have been visited many times in the past.
Yeah, it's one of my complaints about mainstream science. It kind of builds itself into a limited point of view, a box of, and anything that doesn't fit the accepted paradigm is rejected. And if you look at the work of Michael Cremo, Forbidden Archaeology, it's shocking because, in terms of just anthropology and the modern age of humans, people were bringing all kinds of evidence that shows that there were ancient civilizations, and it was being rejected. And it was funny, when we were back in history a couple of hundred years, people were getting to the point of being able to traverse big distances and exceed the speed of sound. There was a whole group of scientists that said, we'll never exceed the speed of sound, and doing so will kill you. You will not be able to survive going faster than the speed of sound, which was, of course, absolute nonsense. And this, I bought that hook, line, and sinker in terms of the stars are too far away, because I was really into astronomy. I love science. So this is true knowledge that you can sink your teeth into and you can't dispute. And if you know how far the stars away, it's mind-blowing. They're very far away. But then again, there's no evidence that ETs are using propellants. And you could never in a million years, literally, fly from star to star using gasoline or propellants or even an ion engine. It would just take too darn long. It's not going to happen. And we're seeing UFOs here in large numbers. There are cases like the Farmington UFO display in 1956 or 7, was it? Where over New Mexico, people were seeing hundreds of craft. There's some cases involving quite a large number of these objects. Where are they coming from? And some of these UFOs are really quite small. And there's a lot of speculation about motherships, which is probably true. But even then, where are they coming from? I think you're absolutely right. They have mastered interstellar travel. And if you talk to the contactees, it's absolutely true. They don't use propellants. Case after case after case, people are taken down to the engine room and explained exactly how these craft work. Some people, they don't have a whole lot of science background, so it's hard to understand. They come away with some idea that this involves electromagnetism, anti-gravity, harnessing the magnetic fields of our planet, this sort of thing. There's certainly interplanetary travel, which apparently, these craft are going some 20, 30,000 miles an hour. But they're traversing star systems as well, because there are contactees who report going to other planets. And I asked Dolly, we dug into this in the book Symmetry, because she had a lot of information about it. And she says, yeah, what they do is open up a light gate. It's an interdimensional thing. It's not a wormhole. It's not a black hole or anything like that. It's a way of, very much like Einstein said, of folding space. She's got her own explanation. She could probably describe it better than I could. But it's traveling interdimensionally, in essence. Leaving the physical third dimension and then coming back out at the desired location. So they can do extraordinary long distances in an instant. So it's easy for them to travel from star to star. So it's absurd to say that, no, that stars are too far away. And I love your analogy, like in the New World, when people are like, it takes 3 months to go from England to the U.S. on a little ship, because that was the best technology we had at that time. And then we got airplanes, and we could do it in a few hours. And we're still improving that. And man, oh man, if we could get that absolute interdimensional technology, we'd be flying to other star systems at this point. It's too bad. If we were a moral society, we could have been there by this point. We could have had open official contact and interaction in a real friendly way. But no, that's not happening because our governments, our secret governments, the cabal, call them what you want, are ruining everything for everybody. Shame on them. They're going to get their just desserts one day.
Yeah, agreed. And it is massively frustrating because, as someone who grew up also just loving astronomy and space, and as a kid, I remember we had a drawing raffle type thing in class when I was in, I think, 6th grade, and there was a cassette series on Halley's Comet, and I was like praying that would still be there by the time I got to pick, like no one else is taking that, but I was so into that, and just the idea of being able to see what other planets might look like and in other star systems. But and I know we're running way over on time here, but one last question for you, since we're on the subject. Do you get any sense from the contactees that any of these civilizations that are visiting are from like other galaxies entirely? Because that would be a really impressive feat of, talk about traveling long distances.
No, I don't get that. What I have heard, Dolly Safran, she says they actually come from one of the star clusters in the Orion constellation. And that really resonated with me because that's exactly what Mike Wing told me. And that's exactly what a number of contactees have told me. And certainly we've had some indication of ETs coming from this area or that area. But I don't have any cases personally from ETs from another galaxy. I'm not going to say that couldn't happen. I'm sure they have the technology to do that. I'll have to ask Dolly about that because she probably would have some information. But no, nothing comes to mind. I don't want to completely rule it out because I haven't really looked into that. There's not a lot of information about where these guys come from because sometimes the ETs seem a little bit reluctant to answer that question, like, where are you from? Like the Betty and Barney Hill case, they said, you wouldn't really understand. And another case I investigated, they said, well, we're from a place you don't know about yet. I'm like, well, that doesn't say a whole lot. So,
yeah, right.
I understand that. I mean, if we are as hostile as we are showing ourselves to be, it might not be a good idea. I wouldn't tell someone who's that violent where I lived. No, I wouldn't. That would be stupid.
Yeah, fair point. Well, I know we went way over on time, so I really appreciate you coming on again, and always fascinating. And I was really excited to have you back on, specifically because UAPs, UFOs, whatever you want to call them, are such a huge topic of conversation right now. And I really hope that after decades of research that you and I both get to enjoy some level of disclosure, no matter where it comes from. Hopefully we'll push hard enough to get, what we already know to be true, but get confirmation. I think that would be obviously very satisfying for all of us.
I would love that. Yeah. I'm waiting.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again so much. Before I let you go, where can people go to stay up on top of your work, get a copy of one of your books and all that good stuff?
Yeah, thanks very much. I do have a website, prestondennett.weebly.com. If you punch my name in the internet, it'll take you there. But certainly I also have a YouTube channel. I'm all over social media, Facebook Messenger, Twitter, and Instagram. And my books are available at online retailers like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and bookstores, of course. But I really do appreciate you having me on the show. I feel like this is a really important topic, especially now. There's been a real change in the way people are looking at this phenomenon and taking it seriously. So it's a good time to be a UFO researcher, and for that matter, a contactee. Because now people are finding the courage to step forward and being believed. So it's a pretty exciting time.
Absolutely. And things have changed exponentially even in the year or two since last we spoke. So, again, I just appreciate your time and coming on, and thanks again.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode, part 2, with my guest, Preston Dennett. We'll be back next week with an all-new mystery. If you've enjoyed this episode or any of the past episodes, consider giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and sharing with a friend. We'll see you next week, and until then, you've been listening to From the Void.